Alright, so for a few years now I've wanted to make a challenge lock and I've had a whole lot of ideas for it and just never quite got around to putting those in action. It's been a little bit daunting, especially since I don't have great tooling to make pins and all that kind of thing, and I had some pretty interesting ideas that I wanted to try out. But I finally did make a challenge lock, and it's right here. I'm calling it the Mk1. And yeah, I did actually get some ideas in place. There's some that didn't work out, and I'll have to figure out another way to make those happen later. Um, Also ran into some problems, and it resulted in some of the changes that you see, like this outer housing and this metal strap that's screwed in. But it's not the smoothest lock. It does catch at the top occasionally, but it does work. Um, so there's that. It's not super aggressive bitting, but it does have some odd cuts and does have this chunk out of the bottom. Um, some of you will know what that means, but we'll get to that. This lock started as a no-name quickset KW1 lock. Wasn't very good, but I've always wanted to make challenge locks out of easy locks and make them into something much more difficult. So to take this apart, unscrew this from the face, this strap pops down out of the way, and then this sleeve comes off. I'm doing it slowly because there's some tricks in here. That strap's back in the way. So you can see there's, let me get something to point with here. There's actually a shim right here. It's not really covering this front spring very well, but it's to make it easier to slide this plastic housing on without bending the springs and shearing them. If you look carefully, there is also, let me see, can we focus here? Yeah, there's also a shim right here that's taped on, and both of these shims are taped on to act as a hinge. So with that in place, I'm going to slowly let that shim off, and you'll see there is, come on, focus. There's a spring there that I'll go ahead and take out. I'm going to put that over here in 7. Still holding down this top shim. I'm going to go ahead also, at least near 7, dump the pin that's in there. Now I'm going to switch hands here. You'll see on the back side here there's another spring. So I'm going to keep holding this shim on top down. And we'll dump this pin as well. So we'll get to what those are for in a little bit. These 2 pins are the only factory made pins in the whole lock. All of the other pins are made out of 1/8 inch brass rod. So I'm going to slowly let this off, and you can see it's mostly copper springs, but they're at various amounts of compression, so they'll put different amounts of force on each stack. And then there's I'm not even sure what this spring is on in 3. We'll take a closer look in a little bit. So the way this lock is set up, I have it where you can gut it from the top because you need to gut it from the top. Part of the reason for this housing is to prevent you from just taking the plug out from the back, because it won't work. So let's go ahead and dump these pins. I think I can probably come on. There we go. That was the right way, and then pin stack 5. Oh. Okay. So yeah, you can see these are just taped on to create a hinge. Then let's take this clip off the plug. Okay. All right, so you can see I've got it built up with an epoxy putty. There are, if I can get that to pull down, there's holes at approximately the 10 and 2 o'clock positions, and this one is in between stacks 1 and 2. This one is between 4 and 5. The other part of the reason that we needed this plastic housing, which I'll just leave that there, was I originally, and it's also why the epoxy ended up being needed, but it gave me some additional options. I threaded the Bible, there we go, for grub screws, but you can see there's a little bit of a slot down the middle of the Bible. When you put the grub screws in, I think it was causing the Bible to spread, and it allowed the other grub screws to just drop down into the pin stacks. So that wasn't really a good option, so I needed a different solution. So let's go ahead and take out this plug. So we'll take a close look here. So very heavy modification, especially to pin stack 3, but you'll see there is some counter milling on 3 here. 1 is fine, like 1 is factory, 2 is factory. There's also counter milling on 4. Filled in the other holes, which I believe are for construction keying. There's also some grooves cut in to the plug there and along here. Those are for these pins that were on the outside, and that is basically, so it'll bounce around as there's rotation, and provide some feedback that is irrelevant to your picking. It might even cause the core to turn a little bit while you're trying to get counter rotation just right. It might fall into one of these deeper grooves. But then, before we take a look at the pins, we'll also take a look in the Bible. So there's counter milling on pin stack 1 and also on pin stack 5. The rest are normal, and you can see where those pins come in to create some interference. So let's zoom in here. Well, move in rather. So what we have is, and again, all of these key pins and driver pins are handmade. Pin stack 1, we have this key pin that has, it's sort of like a reverse spool, but if we can, it's a reduced diameter at the top, a little bit of a taper. The goal is to get an overset on pin stack 1 to hit some of that counter milling in the Bible. That's matched up with a bit of a T-pin. Then on 2, it's not going to focus. On 2, the key pin is serrated, and it has a fairly long spool. Then 3 is where all the difficulty came in. It's pretty crude, but it's sort of based on an M heart. These are interlocking pins, so that's why the groove is necessary, so that the key pin, or the driver rather, it's going to be hard to grab and make this happen in view of the camera. The driver sits down in that groove while at shear. Come on and focus. That's probably close enough. And these pins are the reason why this has to be gutted and assembled from the top. Then moving on to pin stack 4, have a standard key pin and a gin to catch in that counter milling in the plug there. Then pin stack 5 is also a standard key pin and sort of a, I don't know what to call it, it's kind of a spool. It ends up functioning similar to a gin, and it's designed to catch on the counter milling here as well as in the Bible, and by having the middle section wide as well, it will keep it from tipping too much. So hopefully that will cause some problems for anyone picking. And again, all of the springs, most of them are the same spring, but in various conditions. So hopefully that will provide some variance and make it a little bit tougher to get a really good read. So that's the Mark 1. I'm really excited to have finally finished it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to sending it out and seeing what people can do with it. All right, thanks.